Hello and welcome to this episode of This Is Your Life. My name is Michael Hyatt, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership. My goal is to help you live with more passion, work with greater focus, and lead with extraordinary influence. In this special edition of my podcast, I'm going to be talking to my wife, Gail, about the topic of being married to an entrepreneur. You may be the entrepreneur, you may be married to the entrepreneur, both of you may be entrepreneurs. Regardless, I think this will be very helpful to you, and we'll share a few things we have learned in our 35 years of marriage. I can't wait to get to this interview. I think you're going to really enjoy it. But first, this podcast is brought to you by Platform University, an online membership site for helping you launch your personal platform or taking it to the next level. You can find out more at platformuniversity.com. So recently I had a chance to sit down in the studio, actually in my library in my home with my wife, Gail, and we talked about entrepreneurship and marriage, and this is the first of a three-part series. Enjoy. Well, I'm really excited to have here in the studio today my wife, Gail, to whom I've been married for 35 years. I can't believe it. But we've had a great marriage. We've had some challenges, but we've wrestled with this whole thing of entrepreneurship and marriage because it does create some unique problems in a relationship. And in our particular relationship, I tend to be the driven one, the overachiever, the type A personality, the entrepreneur. She's had more the role of being a supporting, nurturing, loving wife. We know plenty of marriages, though, where it's the exact opposite. You know, where the wife is the type A, driven, entrepreneurial type, and the husband plays a more supportive, nurturing, loving role. And so all we can speak out of is our context, but we don't want you to stereotype that and think that it's always the man that's an entrepreneur. We're not saying that at all. It could be either. Sometimes even it's both. But Gail, welcome to the studio. I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast.
Thanks. We're going to have a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think we're going to be of a lot of help to people because this is like one of the number one questions that we get, and you especially get when we're at conferences or even via email. People say, how do you live with this kind of driven person?
That's true. I get that a lot.
Yep. And you've been very good at it. I think this is one of the reasons why, for example, a literary agent has come to you and asked you to write a book on this topic, because I think a lot of people struggle when they're married to an entrepreneur. So just to give you kind of a game plan for those of you listening in, and this could be a really candid conversation between the two of us, and you know, you can take from it what you will. We'll try to distill the takeaways and make it practical and applicable to your situation. But we want to talk about this over a series of, I think, 3 conversations. This first one is going to be really designed for the person who's supporting the entrepreneur and really some gifts that Gail has summarized for us, gifts that you can give to that person who's the entrepreneur or the driven person in your life. Next week, we're going to kind of turn the tables and we're going to talk directly to the entrepreneur or the person who's more the entrepreneur or the driven person. And we're going to talk about what they can do to keep from blowing up their marriage while achieving their dreams. And then the third session is going to be just a question and answer. So if you've got questions about this topic, please leave us a question on our voicemail. That's the best way to do it at michaelhyatt.com/podcast question. Leave a voicemail there. We'll collect them, and then we'll pick the best ones and answer them on the third of this special edition series. So thanks for joining us. Let's jump right into it. Gail, why don't you start with how we met? We want to just give you a little history and a little context.
Okay, well, we met our senior year of college at Baylor University, and we actually attended the same church and were in the college department together. And our college pastor was a man by the name of Gary Smalley, and some people that are listening might know his name. The cool thing that happened to us is the fact that he is now a marriage expert and has written lots and lots of books on marriage and had seminars and all kinds of stuff. He and his wife Norma were very influential early on in our relationship. In fact, really, I will credit Norma Smalley for putting us together. She saw something in the two of us. you had had some leadership roles in the church and had worked very closely with Gary and got to know Gary and Norma, and they absolutely loved you and adored you. And then I came on the scene, and they absolutely loved and adored me too.
You don't say so yourself.
If I don't say so myself. But they put us together just individually. You guys have got to meet each other. You got to get to know each other. And long story short, we did end up together and had some fun times in those years. And Gary and Norma were very involved in our courtship and our engagement and premarital counseling and all kinds of stuff. So I think we really got a pretty amazing foundation just from the get-go.
Well, they did give us a great foundation, and they gave us a great vision for what a marriage could be. And so I think we had very high standards at the outset. And to be honest, I think that served us very well. I mean, it's kept us committed to one another through all these 35 years, and I think it's kept us from settling for something less than the best. And our marriage certainly isn't perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And, I will say that I love Gail more with each year that passes, and she's a vital part of my life. Not only is she my spouse, but she's my best friend, my business partner, my confidant. She's the first person I want to talk to when I wake up and the last person I want to talk to before I go to bed.
And so maybe some of the things that we'll talk about today will show why that's possible or how that's possible, because it's not that, I'm just this amazing person and provide that for you, but there have been some choices that I've made and some decisions that I've made along the way that I think have fostered that.
I think that's right. Now, let me just get a little disclaimer out of the way, because you need to know that we're not marriage experts. We're not marriage and family therapists. We have no formal training in this whatsoever, other than the School of Hard Knocks and what we've learned through life's experience. And so we're really coming to this from the posture of being fellow travelers, fellow strugglers, people who have made a lot of mistakes in our relationship. What we're going to share with you is born out of that experience, doing a lot of things wrong and getting some things right. And I think on average, we've gotten more things right than we've gotten wrong. So that's led us to this place where we are today. We don't think, and I think we share this conviction, and if you disagree, say so, but I think we share this conviction that you don't just drift to a great relationship. You don't just end up there by accident. You fall in love and stay in love. I think any relationship takes work. It takes a lot of incremental work over time. And if you're going to end up at a destination, if you're going to end up in a great marriage, there's a lot of little choices that you got to make, especially the choices that you make every day.
I think that we began our marriage with the end in mind. And that end was that we wanted to have a great marriage and divorce wasn't going to be an option. So if that's kind of where you start, then you work like crazy to put everything into place to produce that outcome. So one of the things that we did and we still do to this day, is we were constantly learning, constantly reading books. I mean, we're sitting here in the library today and I'm looking behind you, and that's the section of all the books on marriage. And it's not that those books are going to make us so smart, but by constantly exposing yourself to strategies and successful advice from people who've made it, then you just really increase your probability of succeeding in this marriage. And that's kind of what we did. I mean, we just are constant learners always.
Well, I think it's worth saying that what you focus on improves. If you focus on something with the intention of improving it, you can improve it. You don't have to settle for an unhappy marriage or a miserable marriage. You really can make your marriage better.
Regardless of where you are.
Yeah. And I think as an entrepreneur, for me, it's been helpful to look at it, and I don't mean to diminish it by saying this, but to look at it as a project. It's something that I'm...
Wait a second.
Not you as the project, but the marriage as a project.
Okay.
And it's something that I want to be working on constantly. It's never done. In that sense, it's like my business. I want to see the growth up and to the right, as we say in business, and the same thing in my marriage. I want it to be constantly improving, always going for that next level.
The other thing is that we're constantly changing. I mean, the couple that we were when we had no children, we first got married, that person then moving to the parent of little tiny toddlers and all the pressures that go along with that, and then the parents of teenagers and moving and living through business failures and all the all the stages of life that one goes through, you're constantly changing as individuals. So you have to change how you relate to each other and how you can grow together.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Well, let's jump into this because I like the framework that you came up with. I made the first pass at this, and then Gail distilled it down even further because we want to give you the essence, and we don't want to waste your time or bloviate. So we want to kind of cut to the chase. But the basic premise here is that you can be happily married to an entrepreneur by offering to them 5 gifts. And so, Gail, let's take these one at a time. What's the first gift?
Well, the first gift is the gift of belief. And there's a saying that you can say to a person, I believe in you. I don't particularly like that very much. It doesn't say a whole lot to me. But there are beliefs that you can communicate to your spouse. And the first one is that you've got what it takes. And I think that part of that is just acknowledging that entrepreneurs are entering into a very risky way of life. I mean, some things that they want to do work, some things they want to do don't work, and there's a lot of pressures that go along with it, and sometimes they feel alone in what they're doing. And so you acknowledge these pressures and these risks that they're taking. And the main message I want to give to you as I think about those things is that I get it. I get what you're going through, and you carry a heavy burden every day, day in, day out. And boy, I don't have to share all of those things, but I get how hard it is.
Well, I think why that's so important is a lot of people think that if you're a leader, you're an executive, you're a small business owner, you're an entrepreneur, that you must just be full of confidence and never have any self-doubt.
Right.
I'll tell you what, that's not any of the entrepreneurs I know, because I am full of self-doubt. And one of the reasons that I think I succeeded as much as I have is because of your belief in me, because in those moments, and I'm not always full of self-doubt. I mean, there are times when I'm probably arrogant.
But you struggle with fear.
But I do. I struggle with fear. I struggle with doubt. And at those strategic moments, you stepped in with a word to just encourage me, to help me believe when I was struggling to believe for myself. And that's made all the difference in moving forward.
And there are times when you're just kind of teetering on, whether to go forward with something or take that risk. And I want to give you the message, assuming that we've talked about things and I feel good about
Connected.
it. I want to give you the message that you can totally do this.
Yes.
You have what it takes. Don't even second guess yourself. Just take that step and go for it.
Well, and you told me that in some big things and some little things. I think of some big things like when I went through a business failure in 1991, which was catastrophic. In fact, we were so broke we couldn't even go bankrupt. We didn't have any assets left.
I remember people bringing us groceries to our door because we had no money for groceries.
Yeah, and it was humbling. It was humiliating. But I didn't really have a lot of time to lick my wounds. I mean, I had to get back in the game because I had 5 kids at the time and 5 daughters, and they needed to eat. You needed to eat. I needed to eat. But you said even in that moment, when I was probably having the most self-doubt ever, you just said, you can do this. I believe in you.
Yeah.
And that was hugely helpful. And it helps in small ways too. Like when I walk off the platform of having just delivered a speech and not feeling like I've done a very good job, you're always there with a warm word of encouragement. You don't lie to me.
Yeah.
But you try to find something to affirm.
Right. That's a key point. You can't just have hollow confidence in somebody, like, oh, gee, I hope you got what it takes. You have to believe it, and I do believe it.
Yep.
So,
you're good at that.
I just want to communicate the truth of what I believe.
Okay, so the second gift you have is the gift of appreciation. Why did you write that one down?
Well, an entrepreneur is a person who takes a lot of risks and they make a lot of sacrifices. And I want to communicate to you, and I think the supportive spouse would want to communicate to that person that their sacrifices don't go unnoticed. And they work really, really hard. I mean, the hardest thing I think about being an entrepreneur is it's really hard to leave your work. When I grew up, my dad, he was in the Air Force. He would go to work, He worked long hours, but when he came home, he was fully there. We did projects together. We would go swimming together and do things like that. But being married to an entrepreneur was a totally different type of world. And you had a very hard time letting it go because it all hung on your shoulders. And so when somebody works really hard and they persevere through the difficult times, and they're constantly learning, constantly growing, then I want to acknowledge that I enjoy a certain amount of security and a certain amount of comfort in this temporal life because of how hard you work and what you do. And so I want more of that, and I'm gonna recognize it in you, and I'm gonna thank you for it.
This goes a long way too towards a feeling that can sometimes develop on the entrepreneurial spouse's part of resentment. It's like, you kind of feel, and there have been times, frankly, that I've felt this way, not too often because you are good at appreciating, but where I felt like, on the one hand, you want more of my time and want me to work less, but on the other hand, your standard of living, you want that to keep increasing, or you've got, certain schools the girls need to go to, or lessons that they want to take, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so there can kind of be a mixed message there. Yeah. And I think that for the entrepreneur, we love our spouse, we love our family, and we want to provide for them, and we want to give them the very best. And sometimes what we forget in that process is one of the very best things that we can give is our time and our attention.
So I think it's important to thank your spouse for very specific things. I mean, it could be as broad as thanks for going to work today or working so hard on that presentation. I mean, the more specific, the better. And also thanking your spouse for the little things that they do. If it's your wife who does the laundry, I mean, the fact that you've got clothes to wear and go to work, thank her for those little things, or for taking out the trash, or playing with the kids, reading them a book at bedtime, whatever it is. But just notice and be verbal with your gratitude.
Another reason why this is important is because it's easy for either spouse, frankly, to feel unappreciated, mm-hmm. to feel unnoticed, unacknowledged.
Taken for granted.
Yeah, taken for granted. And when you start feeling that way, and if you're not getting it from your spouse, you're probably going to try to find it somewhere else.
Wow, that's true.
And that leads to a lot of unhealthy behavior. And we've seen that in many marriages where the person who feels unappreciated ends up in a relationship at work, or maybe it's in the neighborhood, but with somebody that's willing to appreciate them. And that leads to a bad consequence.
Very true.
So that's the gift of appreciation. But let's move on to a similar one, which is the third gift, and that's the gift of affirmation.
Yeah, the gift of affirmation, I think, is different from appreciation, because what you're doing is that you're focusing on what you love about that person. One of the things that I remember, especially early in our marriage, and when you were getting things off the ground, I could get resentful. He's busy all the time. He's working all the time.
Traveling like crazy.
Why can't he ever do such and such? Or why doesn't he do whatever it is? And if you ask yourself those kinds of questions, then the only possible answers to those, why can't he be better at such and such, or why doesn't he do this, then the only possible answers are negative answers. And so how are you going to answer a question like that? Well, because he's so self-absorbed, because he's so selfish, because
narcissistic.
he's so critical, or he's a jerk, whatever answer. The only way you can answer those kinds of questions are with some negative kind of response.
Yeah, so ask a bad question or the wrong question, and you're going to get to a bad answer or the wrong answer.
Yeah, so what I tried to do consciously was ask better questions. And so sometimes when it was really hard to come up with an answer for, I would ask a question like, well, what do I love about him?
That was hard?
Yeah, sometimes it was really hard. And so, or why does he keep going to work for me every day, or for our family every day? And so when you ask a question like that, again, the only possible way to answer those questions is with something positive. So just ask yourself that question about your spouse. Why do I love her so much? What do I love about her? Why does he go to work for me every day?
The great thing about those questions is it connects you back with what originally attracted you to that person in the first place.
That's right. They fuel love.
That's right. Because the truth is, when you're courting, You're choosing to focus on those best qualities and overlook their faults. The faults were always there. It wasn't suddenly like you got married and the person manifested these faults. They were there all along. You were just overlooking them early on.
And you're looking for reasons why to commit yourself to that person. So
Right.
you're obviously going to look for the things that you love about them.
Well, this is one way to stay connected to why you need to stay in the relationship. And I've often heard you say, and I think it's powerful, and that is when people lose their why, they lose their way. And so this is an opportunity to keep reminding yourself of why you're married to this person, why it's not an accident, and what's at stake in staying married.
And it's not my job to change you. It's not the spouse's job to improve the other one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the focus for improvement and change needs to be on me. And then the other, trusting that the Lord's going to work in somebody else's life and work on them. That's not my business. That's not what I'm here for.
What have you noticed happens to the other person when you affirm them?
You get more of what you focus on, no question.
Yep.
And that goes with thanking, for appreciation too. The things that you notice, you get more of.
Yep.
And so if I want more of a critical, complaining, self-absorbed, selfish husband, all I need to do is focus on all those things and I'll get lots of that.
Right.
But if I want a loving, caring, hardworking, faithful husband, then I'm going to focus on those things.
Well, and when you go out on a date, for example, if it's been a while and your spouse finally makes time to spend with you alone, and if you begin that conversation by saying, well, gosh, it's about time, or, focusing on what you don't have, or shaming them, that is not going to make them want to be with you.
Yeah, that's just common sense.
Just common sense. Unfortunately, it's not that common. Does this mean, though, that you can't be honest? This whole focus on giving them the gift of affirmation, what about when there is something that needs to be addressed?
Well, you have to speak the truth in love many times. And sometimes you have to say something like, I love you, but you need to pay attention to this. Or more specifically, you need to pay attention to me. We've had that conversation several times, but there have been many very, very hard conversations that you and I have had.
Both ways.
With tears,
Yep.
both ways, and sometimes out of frustration and anger. Those things definitely have been a part of our marriage, but we've always tried to affirm first of all, how much we love each other, and that what I'm about to say is couched in love. And that I really am standing for the best of our marriage, the best of you, and the best of me. So that's really what I'm standing for.
That's an important point that's worth underscoring, is that it's not from a position or a posture of assigning blame or trying to make somebody wrong, but it's from the posture of, I'm standing for the best in our marriage. And that's why this has to be addressed. And those are hard conversations, but I think one of the things I've tried to do as a driven person, I've tried to do this in companies that I've run and my own business, and it's not always easy, but that is make it safe for people to correct me.
Yeah. And that's really something I learned from Gary Smalley.
Yes.
Is that he would solicit
Input, criticism even.
Criticism. I mean, he was very, very, very teachable and modeled that better than anybody I can think of. And that was something that we just kind of did early in our marriage, is that we opened ourselves up to what other people had to say that would make us better.
Yep. Okay, so we talked about the gift of belief. We've talked about the gift of appreciation. We've talked about the gift of affirmation. This may be my favorite gift of all, number 4, and that's the gift of perspective. Why did you put that down? And I would have put it down too.
Well, I don't know if this is necessarily typical of all entrepreneurs or hard drivers, but because of your need to succeed and meet these goals and achieve your dreams and all this kind of stuff, it's very easy to self-doubt, get fearful, and all the things we mentioned, but you lose perspective, and you work really hard and you get really tired. Sometimes you work late at night, get up early in the morning. So by the time it's 9 or 10 o'clock at night, you are spent. You have given everything that you have to give during that day, and you're discouraged, and
things get apocalyptic.
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. They do. And it's like, oh, why am I doing this? This is never going to work. Why did I spent all day doing such and such, and I know it's just going to flop. It's not going to work. And so part of what I've learned to do is to give you perspective, and part of that is saying, okay, I see you want to worry about this, but just wait to worry. That became one of our little phrases that we keep saying to each other. Wait to worry. I can't tell you not to worry.
Right.
You can't make somebody be what they're not. If they're prone to worrying, they're going to worry. That's okay, but just don't worry right now. Let's put that off till tomorrow. When tomorrow comes, you can worry. Of course, then tomorrow comes. I say, well, wait to worry. You can worry the next day. But just keep putting that off. That's when procrastination is your friend, by the way. And so that's a message that I want to give you. Just wait, because 90% of what you think is going to happen,
so true.
The worst case scenario, never, ever, ever happens.
Exactly right.
I can't, honestly, as hard as we've had some situations in our marriage and in your businesses, I can never think of one situation where it was the worst case scenario.
I know.
You know?
It just rarely happens. But what happens to entrepreneurs, I think, is you're an entrepreneur or you're a leader or you're a business owner because you're creative. Mm-hmm. And when that creativity goes south,
Ooh,
the inverse relationship of that is worry.
Yeah.
Instead of imagining the best case scenario, we start imagining the worst case scenario. And like dominoes, they all start falling. And that happens to me usually late in the evening. In fact, I said this on the podcast last week when I was talking about sleep and productivity, about you asking me this question one time when I was telling you that I was feeling depressed. And you said, well, are you depressed? Are you discouraged? Or are you just tired? That was an important distinction to me. And you probably say that to me twice a week now.
That's a pattern that I've noticed over the years. And people listening may have noticed other patterns. When their spouse really gets to a low place, what is it that usually is the trigger that gets them there? And for you, a lot of it is just being tired. So one of the phrases that we've changed, this has just been in the last year or so, instead of saying, oh man, I'm so discouraged, we'll say, I'm just not my most resourceful self right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's been hugely helpful because it implies that it's a temporary emotional state,
Yep.
that it's not going to be like this forever. And you're not resourceful when you're either tired or you're not feeling energetic, you need to go exercise, or your blood sugar's low, you need to eat, whatever it is. And so to kind of figure out what's the need that needs to be met right then. I remember one time you called me and you were absolutely discouraged. You were about ready to go speak and you couldn't get your talk together. And you were just like, oh man, I don't think I can do this. And I said, all right, here's what I want you to do. Go out and go run for 20 minutes and then call me when you get back.
Yep.
And you didn't want to do it, but you put on your shoes, you went out there and you ran and you called me and you said, man, I'm so excited. I can totally do this, And that was all it needed, was getting outside, getting some fresh air and exercise, get your blood pumping. And
yeah, well, just to go on a little bit of a rant, I think in our culture, too often we reach into the medicine cabinet for some drug, or we see a therapist, and both of those things have their place. I'm not diminishing the fact that people often get or sometimes get clinically depressed or need outside resources to help them. But I'm saying before you go to that, attend to the physical needs. Get a good night's sleep, go out for a run, check your diet, make sure that those things are squared away before you look for more significant measures. And
just one other thought on perspective. One of the other things I've done is try to remind you of similar situations in the past that you were in and how they worked out. Mm-hmm. So that just gives you perspective, like, okay, even if this does happen, we handled it that time, we can handle it this time, or whatever.
Yeah, and I would say one of the things that helps us too, and this is just our underlying foundational worldview, is that we really do believe that God works all things together for good, and that nothing happens by accident.
Nothing is wasted.
Nothing is wasted.
That's a huge foundational principle.
Yeah, and everything is used in our lives, so that even the really bad things that look like tremendous adversity and something horrible, that in God's providence He uses those for our good. And not always right away, and not always in a way that we can understand it in this life perhaps, but that's a foundational belief that really helps.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move into the fifth and final gift, which is the gift of commitment.
Gosh, I think this really is the foundation of everything. It's important that the supportive spouse communicates and reaffirms his or her commitment to the relationship, to the marriage, especially in those difficult days. Yes. I think that it's important that I say to you, I am with you. Even if the worst case scenario ends up happening, which we already said hasn't yet, but if it did, I'm still with you. I'm not going to blame you. I'm not going to shame you. We are in this together. And even, I remember one time we were going through, I think it was IRS audit or something, where we were risking losing absolutely everything because of the penalties and things that we were going to have to pay. And it was possible we were going to have to lose our house and all kinds of stuff. And I remember saying to you, you know what? Even if we live in a cardboard box, it doesn't matter. I'm with you. I know we can pull out of it. We'll learn a lot of good stuff through it. It'll, whatever. And so I'm with you. That's the bottom line.
Well, and your commitment to me at that time was so important to me because that was a very fearful, horrendous process. And amazingly, just to kind of go back to the perspective point of view, is the worst case scenario didn't happen. Yeah, we did end up paying penalties and some other things, but the money was there when we needed it. We took care of it. We got it resolved, and all was well.
Yeah, we learned a lot.
But your commitment in the midst of that was the thing that really helped me pull through that. So I think there's got to be that commitment to the marriage. And the measure of that is not when you're feeling great about the relationship, but when things get rocky. And unfortunately, a lot of people miss the blessing of deeper intimacy because they don't hang in there through the tough times. Mm-hmm. And I think it's our whole culture. It's like I remember Dr. Dobson saying one time, most people think love is a feeling you feel when you feel like you're going to get a feeling you've never felt before. And love is more than a feeling. Love is mostly a decision. Make the right decisions and the feelings will follow.
I agree with that. And I think that one of the things that you and I grew up with a dad who was very predictable and all of that. And I married a man who was all over the map and always experimenting and trying new things. But fundamentally, even though we were very, very different and came from very different homes and backgrounds, that I was committed to doing whatever it took to grow deeper with you, to love you more and more, and to have a marriage that was powerful and impactful.
Well, thank you for that. You have given me all 5 of these gifts: the gift of belief, the gift of appreciation, the gift of affirmation, the gift of perspective, and the gift of commitment. And I just want to thank you for that. I think that's made a huge difference in our relationship. And next week, we're going to talk about what the entrepreneur or the leader, him or herself, needs to do to still accomplish their dreams, but not blow up their marriage. In fact, to develop really a thriving marriage. And I can't wait to get into that topic. So now it's your turn. If you're listening to this, I would love to get your best advice. Some of you are entrepreneurs. Some of you are married to entrepreneurs. But I'd love for you to leave a comment on the show notes that accompany this podcast. And you can find that at michaelhyatt.com/69, as in episode 69. michaelhyatt.com/69. I'll be back in a minute to make a few final announcements.
Don't close your eyes. Don't close your eyes. Don't close your eyes. Don't close your eyes. This is your life. Are you who you want to be?
All right, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that time with Gail. Just 3 quick announcements. Number 1, the Platform Conference is going to be in Dallas, Texas. It's not very far away here, just a few days, November 3rd through 5th, 2013. We still have a few tickets left. But who should attend this? Small business owners, business executives, social media managers, authors, speakers, agents, publishers, bloggers, podcasters, mortgage brokers, real estate agents, basically anyone who wants to take their platform from where it is and take it to the next level. We've got a terrific lineup of speakers this year. Ken Davis, who's my business partner and a terrific, terrific speaker. Lisa Turkhurst is going to be talking about marketing and how you build the marketing into a product so that buzz occurs and people want to talk about it after you produce it. Derek Halpern is going to be there and talking about kind of the psychology of selling and how to monetize your platform. Jeff Goins will be there. He's been one of our favorites and somebody that's been a regular presence on my blog and at our conferences. Cliff Ravenscraft, who is the podcast answer man and talks about all things podcast related. Stu McLaren will be talking about membership sites and also about monetization. Michelle Cachat will be our MC, and she has a terrific message, also inspirational message on how to keep going when you want to quit. Ray Edwards will be there talking about copywriting for the web and how you get people's attention through your writing. And Amy Porterfield there is really one of the world's leading experts on Facebook marketing. So that's the Platform Conference. I would love to see you there, and you can find out more at platformconference.tv. Then I want to talk about WordPress setup. If you've been thinking about launching your own personal platform, or if you're ready to take it to that next level, a phrase I've used a bunch of times in this podcast, but the best way to do that is through installing what's called self-hosted WordPress. This is the blogging platform that most professional bloggers use. It's the platform that I use and the one that I recommend. And I've got a tutorial at michaelhyatt.com/WordPress setup. It will get you set up. It's a screencast. It will get you set up in 20 minutes or less. It's easy to do. Best of all, there's a special discount through Bluehost Hosting to get you set up for just $3.95 a month. That's $1 a month off their regular price. You can only get that through my affiliate link on that screencast. So again, that's michaelhyatt.com/WordPress setup. The next podcast, and this is the third and final announcement, is going to be on entrepreneurship and marriage part 2. And this time we'll be talking to the entrepreneurs themselves and what they can keep or what they can do to keep from blowing up their marriage and what they can do to make their marriage thrive, even while accomplishing those crazy, outrageous goals that they have. So if you've got a question about entrepreneurship and marriage, again, I want to encourage you to go to michaelhyatt.com/podcast question. In the third episode, Gail and I are going to take those questions, and it'll be a terrific chance to get a link back to your site and a shout out to you on the air. So that's it for this episode of This Is Your Life. The show notes will be found at michaelhyatt.com/69. And if you'd show us the love, I'd be grateful by going to michaelhyatt.com/love. That'll give you a chance to tweet out a link. And also, if you could rate the podcast on iTunes, that'll help keep it visible to people who are searching on iTunes. But until next time, remember, your life is a gift. In fact, your marriage is a gift. Now go make it count.